I want to thank Stephanie for the amount of research that she's done, which has been fantastic. You know, she's been a completely, started as a very lone voice, and she's persisted and she's persisted. And I think what she says is completely measured, rational, thoughtful, and evidence-based. The thing that I'm going to talk about now is how is it that something as evidence-based and as calmly presented as Stephanie's argument is now treated as something so outrageous that it can be thought of as hateful and phobic. So what intrigues me about this is the way that someone like Stephanie, or indeed myself, is always introduced if we talk to the media, and then they do their little presentation on the radio or television, as controversial. And I'm shocked by this. What is controversial to me is that we're experimenting on our children at the moment, and the kinds of experimentation that we do can lead to sterilization of our young people. That, to me, is utterly shocking. So how have we got to this stage? How have we got to this state of affairs is what I hope to address. And can you shout at me when my 20 minutes is up, or my 15 minutes now? Because I can just go on talking about this for a long time if I get half a chance. So I'd like to begin with the young people who we passed as we were coming in here, the protesters. And what I've learned about those young people over the period of time that I have been researching into this world of transgender theory and doctrine and politics. Someone said to me, there will be trans activists outside, will you be okay with that? And I said, sure, I'll be okay with that, I'm getting used to that now. But what I've learned over the period of time is that these trans activists, I shouldn't be saying this, are very dedicated people who imagine that they're being revolutionary and progressive and that they have the answers to gender. And they believe it very firmly. And I remember back to when I was 18 and I would stand and protest about various things, and I had fervent beliefs. So I'm sympathizing with these young people, actually, because they have no experience of any other way of thinking about gender. They've grown up in a context in which they are told that gender identity is inherent, deep, deep inside them, and that sex is something that's socially constructed. So, instead of blaming these young people, which none of you are, I know, or instead of even thinking of them as extremists, they are in the sense that they will not come in and listen to the discussion. That's a very serious thing, I think, and we could talk a lot about that. How have we come to a world in which people won't even hear ideas to find out whether they disagree with them or not? But they have this belief, this fundamental belief that gender identity is inherent. They can't explain where it is. You say to them, well, where is it then? Where is this gender identity that you were born with? That's an irrelevant question as far as they're concerned, but I'm going to ask it tonight. And I'm going to say that in answering that question, you have to look at the origins of how that concept emerged into the culture. I know this sounds very philosophical, but unless we get to the bottom of this, because it is a concept, unless we address that, we're partially going to believe that transgender children really are real. And I'm proposing that transgender children are not real. In order to be transgender, you would have to be born in the wrong body and have a gender identity somehow born with you that doesn't match your chromosomes, your genitals, etc., etc. So, I'm in danger of talking too sociologically about this. I'll try and hang back. So in talking about that, I want to just tell you something about myself, and it goes alongside this, that I am a mother, I have 4 children, and indeed I am a grandmother now. And that when I had children, I have a mixture of boys and girls. Gender was thought of by progressive people, like myself, and others, as something that is socially constructed. So when one of my children, I hope he doesn't listen to this, so that one of my boys, who has a sort of androgynous first name, and was very pretty, and wanted to wear dresses and grow his hair long, and so on and so forth. We lived in a historical period where there wasn't the concept of transgender. There just simply wasn't the concept. And in fact, as parents, we prided ourselves that we had a son who felt cool enough and relaxed enough to want to experiment with what it feels like to be a girl. Because children experiment with different roles. That's what children do. That's, as adults and as a society, we support children in these developmental stages, or we used to do that. That was one of our ethics, that children would grow and develop, and we watched and waited and hoped that we did well, and we guided them. So, the common wisdom then was that if a boy experimented with conventionally, stereotypically feminine things, that he would be gay. That was a narrative that was going around, a narrative which, again, as his parents, we didn't go along with. Why? Why would he be gay? Why would it automatically be that a boy who wanted to know what it was like to be a girl, just like he wanted to know what it was like to be a, fire engine driver or a bricklayer or whatever else, throughout his childhood he did. And if you're interested, he's not gay. He's heterosexual. And he has his own body, thankfully. So, in a very short period of time, from when I was a mother of young children, this concept has grown. And it's taken historical roots so firmly now that it's very difficult to say to somebody that there's no such thing as the transgender child. They assume that you are against transgender rights. They assume that you're not sympathetic to children who are gender confused. And of course, once the discourse gets into, you can't think about gender as a social construct. You have to believe in it as some sort of truth. You're straying onto the realms of faith, almost religious faith, and people become scared of saying, I don't quite believe that. So we're in this bizarre situation now where we have schools, hospitals, social workers, police officers, all believing that there is such a thing as a transgender child, so that even questioning it is tantamount to heresy. So that we, who are concerned with children, and everybody here is concerned for children, we are regarded as controversial. This really frightens me. Because if we take it away from children, the issue of children, if we take it to just being in a society where there are certain things that a lot of people are scared of saying, and where authority figures seem to police us in our thoughts. And even, I know that some parents in this country have children in social care because they didn't believe that their children were transgender. How much longer have I got? Am I doing okay? 9 minutes. Okay. I think society is in trouble when we've got to the stage where teachers, for example, I'm not singling teachers out, will assume, without even questioning, that organisations like Gendered Intelligence or Stonewall, when they come to their school, when they advise them or provide workshops, must be correct in their opinion. Otherwise, why would they be the go-to people? It must be the case that they're sensible organisations. My daughter, who doesn't hear the end of me talking to her about these things, when I talked to her about mermaids, she went to her school and said that she didn't mind her 7-year-old and 5-year-old having sex education lessons. It wasn't because she didn't want them to know about such things, but she didn't want mermaids to be the provider, and she wanted some assurance from the head teacher that mermaids wouldn't be the provider. And the head teacher said, "Oh, no, absolutely. No, you're fine, don't worry about it. We don't have mermaids, we have Stonewall." And this is the level at which, even after a discussion, the head teacher of that primary school didn't even understand what the implications of any of it were. So something becomes reinforcing. Teachers seem to believe in it, so parents seem to believe in it, and then they take them to gender identity clinics, and the doctors seem to believe in it. And it all reinforces, it all helps construct the child. So I want to reverse that. I do reverse it. I say, this child has been in the making in a very brief period of time. It doesn't actually exist, the transgender child. A child confused about gender no doubt will have existed for as long as gender as a social construct has existed, because gender is confusing. I expect every single person in this room was confused as a child in some sense or other. Are you masculine enough? Are you feminine enough? Is it okay if you do that? Is it alright if you're a girl and you climb trees and you tear your dresses? And all kinds of messages that we get. So I'm not saying that gender confusion didn't exist. But I am reversing the trans doctrine that trans children have existed forever, and we're progressive now because we can recognise their existence and they can come out of the woodwork and be open about it. I think we do our children a great disservice when we think like that. We've created the concept of the transgender child, and it's through that concept that children are now understanding and realising themselves. They have no other way of understanding gender. So, I think that the transgender doctrine is very reactionary, not progressive at all, because it gives the idea to little boys as well as to little girls that if they're one thing, then they're betraying, or they must be the other sex, rather than just be who you are. It doesn't matter. Let's be truly progressive and let children be whoever, whatever they are, and not confine them to this reactionary idea that there is such a thing as a deep inherent masculinity and femininity. We're going back years and years and years by adopting that, but those young people out there simply can't get their head around that because they've been told that it's about freedom to decide that you're in the wrong body, and I won't repeat all the data that Stephanie gave you. So, I think I'm probably coming to the end now. Is there one more thing that I want to say? I'm not quite sure. I'm going to go and sit down and I'm going to remember the exact thing that I should have said, but that I didn't. So, yes, I'm very happy to answer any questions, and I'm patting myself on the back that I didn't launch down a philosophical and sociological route that would have probably bored you to tears, but I can tell you that tracing the history of this concept has been fascinating. I've done it for my research, and you can see it emerge into the culture and take a hold, and then take more of a hold, until now it's almost irrefutable. People think you're mad if you say there's no such thing as the transgender child. One last thing I've just remembered. Since the book that my colleague Michelle Moore and I did about transgender children and young people born in their own body, we came across something that has been quite shocking. And I can't talk about it in too much depth. Firstly, because I haven't time, and because, secondly, because there is a need for anonymity here. But what has happened since that book is that we discovered, as well as many other people, that some of the medical practitioners who are giving our children or advising that our children have hormone blockers and cross-sex hormones don't even believe in the transgender child either. And I hope that one day this whole debacle, this terrible thing that has happened in history to our children will be exposed, and that one day we look back at this period of time, as we have with other things that have happened in history, and think, how did people go along with that? How could that have been done in broad daylight? What was it that was going on that made people petrified, even doctors, to stand up and say, the emperor has no clothes on? Thank you.